Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, a podcast that celebrates Star Wars from the perspective of music and sound. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, a longtime Star Wars fan and a musician, and in doing this show, I hope to impart some useful tools that can help empower you to consider music and sound in your own lives regardless of your training. This is the first episode, so this spiel isn't quite down yet, but you may be noticing a striking similarity to a podcast called Star Wars Minute, and you would be correct. This show is directly inspired by Star Wars Minute. Brilliant, and I'm so grateful to Pete and Alex for giving me their blessing to go ahead with this. I just thought it would be fun to keep up with Star Wars Minute, and in doing so, we're actually jumping right into The Last Jedi season instead of starting a release order from the beginning. So if you are listening to Star Wars Minute at this time, you can keep up, like we're going to do 5 minutes today, and it's going to be the same 5 minutes that Star Wars Minute, the main show, just covered last week. If you have no idea what that is, don't worry. Each episode will be a conversation about the music and sound of Star Wars, so it should be interesting regardless. Anyway, today's guest is someone very special. This is Erica Duke Kirkpatrick, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see she has her cello out. So I think this might mean we're going to get some music examples right off the bat, and I'm super excited. Erica actually played on all three of the sequel scores. She played on The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. And Erica, before we start describing what is going on in the first 5 minutes of The Last Jedi, I do want to share a story about when you were recording this. And I don't know if you know this, but The Last Jedi recording sessions were in about 2016, 2017. Is that correct?
2017, yeah.
Yeah, 2017. And I know Erica from school, and 2017 is the year I graduated, actually. So I just remember, I have these memories, Erica, of you and also Lorenz, who was my violin teacher, always having to cancel rehearsals, and you would miss concerts, and you would just your schedule was really finicky around that time, but you couldn't say why. And it was this whole thing, and you'd be like, I have to go to Culver City. I have to head up to Culver City. And you're always coming from Culver City and going to Culver City. And I have to say, you did such a good job keeping that a secret, because I had no idea that this whole time you were recording on Star Wars The Last Jedi. If I had known, I would have I don't know what I would have done, but I was very excited when I found out. I was very excited. I was like, miss all I don't care. We'll reschedule anything. Oh, yeah, right. So cool.
Well, we wouldn't, I have to confess, I would never miss anyone's recital. That would be a terrible crime. I would give up a session for a recital. But turning everybody's schedule upside down was a terrible thing of us to do.
Yes, oh my gosh. It wasn't. But what was that experience like, recording on any of the prequels? Sequels.
The sequels for us, yes. It was wonderful. It was the most exciting thing that I think, and I could probably speak for Lawrence, that we had ever done, because we between the two of us, we had played on hundreds of film scores that we were not grabbing onto so tightly. This was a really special event, and we kind of knew it. The only reason why the last 3 movies were scored in Los Angeles at all is simply because John Williams, he couldn't make that trip to London anymore, because he is, he's getting up there, he's in his late 80s, and he just felt this was too much of a stress for him. And the fact that that Lucasfilm and Disney agreed that he was the thread, the link that held the entire thing together, that it was worth working where he lives, because he lives out here in Los Angeles. And that way, he still had musicians who he loved working with, and he still had the orchestrators that he wanted and needed, to help him, because the project's too big for one person alone. I read something funny I should never look at the internet before I go on.
Oh my gosh, I know.
But no. But there was a little. I didn't even click on it. But there was some sort of person proclaiming that he couldn't read notes and that he just plinked stuff out on the piano.
What? Really?
John, there is
That's
nothing further from the truth. I can
I know.
swear on
I
a
think
stack of
out of all
Bibles.
film composers, I feel like he's one of the ones who is very old school in doing a lot himself.
Yes, well, he knew so much. He knows, I should say. He's still around. He knows so much. He has encyclopedic knowledge of most of the music that's gone back the past 400, 500 years. And that's how he brings it into his movies because he knows it so well that he can speak the language of whatever composer he's summoning up from the dead, you know?
I'm so glad. It's funny.
No,
It's funny
he's
you
a
said that.
brilliant,
It's so
he's a
funny that you say that
brilliant,
though. I'm glad that you phrased it that way because because if you go on the internet or talk to anyone who wants to talk about John Williams, you hear like, oh, he just rips off of Holst and Korngold and such and such. And meanwhile, here I'm thinking as a composer, like I couldn't do that if I tried. That would require me to really study. Like it's impressive, even if you want to frame it that way, that he can even do that. That he can even like summon those languages.
no,
It's not
exactly.
easy to just emulate Korngold
Right,
and like
right. Or
all these other
Holst
influences.
or Howard Hanson or some of the amazing composers of the last 200 years. The thing with him is that, and when I was young, I thought, oh, that's Prokofiev. Oh, that's,
Mm-hmm.
Berlioz. No, it wasn't. It was him taking that language and knowing it, imbuing himself with it so thoroughly that he could speak it like he was learning to speak Mandarin, like he learned foreign languages and was able to and make them sound like he was a native. And it got to the point where I understood that even if he was using source material that I recognized, it never he was never picking it up, verbatim. He was taking the language and turning it into a new composition. And one of my very dear friends and stand partners during these sequels kind of reminded me that John Williams probably single-handedly saved the orchestra as a tool for film composition. And
Oh.
in fact, might have saved classical music inadvertently, right? Because he's the one that really wanted a real orchestra with real musicians, and it wasn't just a few that were coloring some synthesizer background. When he scored and we played, there were 105 musicians in that room, and you could feel the 3D power of that sound reverberating in that space because it's meant for just recording. So the space was completely enveloped with just pure sound, nothing else. Everything that they add in terms of reverb happens later. But the just the idea of using a symphony orchestra sound, not only did he save probably the interest in classical music and certainly interest in film music, but he inspired so many people, not all of whom wrote classical or orchestral music, to get that kind of a sound. And he could only have done that, I think, in my humble, by knowing orchestral scores so well and knowing orchestration so well, and then coming up with his own, what do you call it, like leitmotifs. They talk about this, that he worked like Wagner in having, each character had their own theme that was very distinct, and it would help you follow the action sometimes when it was, very complicated on the screen, by the music telling you this character is in trouble, this character's coming up, this character's fighting. It's amazing how much of a mark he made on that, and I'm really happy that well, both universally and selfishly, universally because they kept him to do the last three films after that huge hiatus, because they needed that. They understood they needed that thread to carry it through, and selfishly because they happened to be scored in Los Angeles. And I'm talking about that trailer and the sound quality. I went back and listened to. Thank you
Do you
for
mean the trailer
sending
or do
me.
you mean the first 5 minutes?
Oh, try again.
You mean like the crawl, the opening crawl?
The opening crawl,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Yeah, that's
So
not
I
part of the
listened to
trailer.
the open. No, of course not.
Yeah,
But I listened to the opening crawl from all of them.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think I know part of what is going on when a fan
Oh,
says, well, it sounds
okay.
different. I'm sure
Yes.
you're going to agree with me.
Let me preface this by referencing the original question that we got.
Gotcha.
Alex from Star Wars Minute had asked on episode 2 if the opening crawl, basically the main title, well, that was the wrong key, but anyway,
No, you were right.
if the main title sounded funny this episode, or just sounded a little bit different, and that was actually the direct inspiration for me starting this show, because on that show he had said, "Oh, we need Chrysanthi to answer this question," and that's when I was like, maybe I'll just do a whole podcast about these questions. So, and the first person I immediately thought of was Erica, because Erica has the most spidey sense, perfect pitch I've ever encountered. And I don't think perfect pitch, by the way, I don't say that to be like perfect pitch is important. It's not important. Like, no, perfect pitch is not
But
something.
you have it.
It doesn't mean that Erica is better because she has perfect pitch, but just she does have very spidey ears. And she's very perceptive, and she would be a good person to talk about this. But if you go through, and you can find these on YouTube, people have put together all of the opening crawls one after another. You can compare like what the 1977 version sounded like versus like you can hear them all in succession, basically. And even though it's the same, sheet music, essentially, it's the same thing. It's the same main title. It sounds slightly different each time. So people have speculated, do they re-record it every time? Which I think the answer, but there's more to it than that. They really do sound different if you compare the first one to the last one.
Definitely. And of course, when you think about the first one, the real first one in terms of acoustics is number 4.
Yeah, episode 4. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because that is the 1977 one. And of course, they had just invented THX sound. That was part of the deal with this movie, that it was going to introduce that. And that was a remarkable thing back in 1977. But I think part of what was going on, because first thing I noticed when I heard this 1977 is that it started, a microtone higher. And it was a little bit wobbly, and I think part of that may be the mix, the age of the mix. The first, okay, let me get them in order. 4, 5, 6.
Empire
1, 2,
Strikes
3.
Back is next.
Yes. But that's number 2. Okay, those were the first 3 were done at the same period of time, within a 5-year period, the late 70s, early 80s, and I believe that the sound quality, that whole differential was there. So now I have to put oh boy, let me try them in the right order. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3.
The
Old people
prequels.
think like this. Yeah, the prequels. They were all done. They were done, several years apart, the 2 sets, but they were both done in London. They were both done, I believe, at Arvin Studios, but it was the London Symphony. And they're magnificent. They are completely magnificent. The mix was different. I noticed because I was listening to 4 and 5, that the sound of it is it was mixed heavily towards the brass, as you were mentioning, I think, when we were talking before, so that you couldn't really hear the rest of the underpinning of what was going on to a great extent.
So you're talking about Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi?
Yes. Yes, as opposed to
from the 70s and 80s.
From the 70s and 80s, and then I think that it was it may not have been the same studio. It was the same symphony. It was also in London for 1, 2, and 3, all the prequels. I don't know how the sound had changed by then, but I know how much it changed for the 3 that we got to play in Los Angeles, all being done at Sony Studios, the old MGM, where they did, I believe, among other things, The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, that's an old studio. But the room itself is old, but the booth is completely remodeled, and they had a totally different mix, a mix where you could hear just about everything. It was definitely a purposeful decision, perhaps, or maybe they also had more control. But I can tell you that one thing, John, a lot of composers do in order to get that kind of sound separation is they do stems, like the strings will play alone, the
John
winds will
doesn't do
play
that,
alone.
huh?
Hell no. No, 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 no. He refuses. He wants the totality of it. And so his sessions, you've got a massive orchestra all playing together at the same time. Nobody's separated out.
Okay,
And
let
then
me
it's
let me
up
parse
to
this
the
out a little
both.
bit in case people haven't heard
Yes.
what stems are. Usually, I mean, I didn't record on Star Wars, but in my experience doing like other films and any project, big or small, usually things are overdubbed, and you'll have different instruments and different sections and sort of different varieties of like ingredients that the mixing engineer can then piece together in a way that gives finer control over how loud or soft certain elements are going to be. It's just, it's just a more ingredients based mixing process. But in my experience, like growing up as a violinist playing in orchestra, like with classical music, that wasn't really something that was done for live performances. You spend months maybe rehearsing the balance of how the balance is going to be, and then when you perform it, the conductor has really given you a sense of like how the mix is going to be. Basically, it's weird to describe it like this because I grew up playing, and then now I do engineering and producing some of my own stuff too, and now I do a lot of stems and like a lot of just having the elements and then doing post production, and a lot of composers still do that. John Powell does a lot of stems, or is that right? Yeah, and not just him, but like a lot, and it's also a money thing. But
Yes, yes. Often they'll have the strings in by themselves, right? You've done an
exactly,
entire day with just
brass a
strings.
different day. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
So you don't
expensive to
communicate.
get the full
Yeah,
orchestra in.
yeah.
But something that I hear people who have worked on Star Wars, like mixing engineers, when they talk about mixing John Williams, they say like he basically mixes it on the fly just by conducting the mix that he wants.
Yes. So he is a real musician's musician, and he is a magnificent conductor. He is incredible communicator. So polite and so helpful. He's trying to be helpful to the orchestra. There's just no ego in it at all. But his ear is brilliant. He's very distinct about what he wants in a certain passage. And the other thing that he does is I don't know, his superpower in a way. I know very few people who have, maybe David Newman, but he can conduct without and prefers to conduct without a click track. He would rather conduct
Wow.
to the film. And here's something interesting. When we recorded those movies, um, the sequels, we were not allowed to see the film because they were keeping it a big under wraps mystery. And so you've been to MGM, it's a huge soundstage with this huge screen as if you were sitting in a movie theater, and it plays while you play. And if you're playing and have memorized your part, you can sort of look over and see what's going on the screen, and it sort of inspires you, or you know what you're playing to. And it also helps the conductor because the conductor has it in his peripheral vision. Well, because of these I don't know, keeping it a secret, security issues, they did not want us to have any view of the screen. They didn't want us to know what was going on. They just wanted to concentrate on our parts. So John had a single monitor, and I'm not going to say it was a huge one, little TV monitor directly in front of him. And he had to conduct the orchestra while following this teeny tiny screen. So I think, yeah, he's an amazing musician, an amazing musician, and he wanted that because he really didn't like the clicks. He felt it sounded stilted, and it kept the orchestra from having a swing and a flow that would be able to be more responsive to the action.
Wow.
So it would sometimes take us a little longer because it's hard to nail it when you're working with a teeny tiny screen instead of a massive one that fills the room. But
Yeah.
he said that was the better way to do it, and I believe him. He's absolutely right because
So
he
that's
can do that.
and that's very different from the other sessions that you've done right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Not that they aren't great composers and great musicians,
But
but
the level of secrecy and
oh, it was nothing like
breaking.
that. I've never
Yeah.
had it with no screen. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Do you have any for The Last Jedi, I heard that Ryan Johnson actually went to a lot of the scoring sessions. Did you ever
he
see him?
did. I don't think I was. I'm terrible. I wasn't paying enough attention. I was busy working on my. I was busy working on my own part.
I mean,
What I remembered
that's good
mostly
excuse.
was no. What I remembered more was episode 9 because especially towards the end because it was going to be the end of John Williams' work with Star Wars and Star Wars in general. Not in general, in that particular Skywalker saga. That Steven Spielberg, his friend from way back, came just to be a support and a fan and a cheerleader and see him to the end like that. It was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen. And Mark Hamill came to that as well. See, it's
So
so funny we're talking
cool.
about 8 because I
Oh,
mostly remember 9
I mean, the
because there was
bookends.
the bookends. Yes, yes, very much so. But no, people were showing up at those sessions almost all the time because they just wanted to be part of listening to that music live in a big room because they were getting the full experience.
That's
And it was
incredible.
really fun to have people. Yes. Oh my goodness, the young woman who played Ray,
Daisy
Daisy
Ridley.
Daisy Ridley. She came, and in
John
fact,
Williams
John's
loves her.
yes, he spoke on stage, on the soundstage about how wonderful he thought she was, and that she inspired. I mean, her themes. It was really a beautiful thing to hear him say that, right?
I've heard that too from Jim Shveda from Classical KUSC.
Oh my gosh,
When he
yeah,
interviews, he's a good friend of John Williams, and um,
great.
whenever Jim used to stop by my desk, he would tell me he knew I was a big fan, and he would tell me, John did it because he basically asked, "Is Daisy Ridley coming back?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll do another film."
I totally believe
Honestly,
it,
and
and
her, I
I
love her
totally believe
theme.
it.
I love Ray's music. She has really
Yeah,
great music.
he totally based it on Daisy. I mean, he came up with that, and it's so beautiful and wonderful that he did that. I don't know. I'm just more of a fan of his than ever since getting to
That's
work with
really
him on
cool.
this. He is everything you would imagine. It's all true. He's kind. He's brilliant. He has a great ear. He's flexible at his age. My God, being flexible like that is remarkable, and
What
always
types of
just
things would he need to be flexible
open.
to?
Oh, slight changes in the shoot, which would require him to change the music ever so slightly. Usually not as much as other composers. He had it pretty well down, but there's always last minute changes. Just the flexibility in the way he freehand conducted instead of using the click, and the way that he was able to communicate with the entire orchestra what he needed, and of course everyone was thrilled to be doing it for him.
Did he know any of the musicians? Like
He did.
recognize?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of them that he knows. I'm not one of them, but like half the orchestra he knows very well and likes very much. He uses a lot of used a lot of people from the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra.
Okay.
They would be kind of a lot of the backbone of that orchestra. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of young musicians migrated to Los Angeles just to get to work with him, actually.
Hmm.
Saw
Not
a
a bad
bit of
reason.
turnover. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Before we get into the 5 minutes of The Last Jedi, um, I want to do some Mythbusters, just because while you're here,
yeah.
there's some
Whatever I
things I've
know.
heard on the internet that I just want to make sure are. I just want to get the definitive answer. Are the main titles re-recorded every film, or do they
Yes.
reuse? Okay, all right. Um, Actually, that was the main question because
Which makes it fun because you're always dying to play the main theme. You always hope it's in there somewhere.
oh, I'm glad that was an easy question because I've seen
Very.
things online that are like no for they like reuse the ones they just
Yeah.
record it once and then
It's
reuse it
his
for the
music.
sequels.
It's his music. He gets to re-record it. And of course, he wants it fresh every time.
Mm.
That's up to him. And yeah, absolutely, it's worth re-recording it every time because it's going to be a slightly different sound each time because they have the mic set, they have the room set, they have, you know, and it might even be the same engineers, but everything is set a little bit differently each time, as much as they try to keep it the same. So,
Yeah. For the main title, what we were talking about before was something that, as we get into these minutes that start with the main title, it's, I guess, a good time to talk about this. The early recordings really heavily feature the brass. And when I was texting you, that's kind of what I meant in terms of when people think of the main theme, they think of da 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 da. They think of like the main brass line. But if you look at the score or hear later recordings that have everything a little bit more crystal clear, you can hear how that main line is supported by the other instruments. And I think the cello has an interesting rhythmic like part that really anchors it
yeah,
down.
we're the counterpoint to the brass. And you know, the funny thing is, when I was a kid and I heard it in the theaters, I thought that it went like, let's see if I can say it. Da 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 da, 1, 2, da da da, 1, 2. I thought that because that's all I could hear. And it turned out when I finally had to play
Yes.
with the score, my jaw dropped. Went, oh, it's on the offbeat. It's on the offbeat. So I realized that I'd been hearing it wrong the whole time. Awesome. It's fantastic to find out, you know. I mean, when they first recorded it too, it was brand new. By the time I got to play these last 3 films, it was already canon. So, you know, it's a different feel to it. But the biggest surprise to me was that the high B flat was not on beat 1. Because I thought the brass just owned the show. And of course, he loves the brass. That's what it's all about. But that was not the only thing in the score. And when I found out that my part really was different from the main melody until I got the main melody, that was a bit of a revelation for me. Funny.
I wonder if people can you demonstrate what you mean by the high B flat being on the 1 versus not
Sure.
on the 1?
So what the melody, I'll probably screw it up. I'll do it down an octave. So I thought
That's
hearing it
that's
with the
the correct
brass.
version. That's what it is.
Well, not really.
Oh wait, no.
I mean, well, yes, it does. It was all right. The music was the same, but it's where is the downbeat as a bar, and I always thought it was 1,
1.
2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, because that's the
Yeah.
important note. But they're not. They're not.
Right.
It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's not my part. Well, sometimes it's my part, but my part, let's see, could you maybe, how can I do this?
I know I'm trying to think because
Let me
if I do
try
it,
and see
we
if I
won't be
can.
synced.
I know. Let me see if I can badly sing and play at the same time. Da 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 da. Oh my God, I can hardly do that. It's really hard.
That's
so
hard.
so my part is 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and only the 13th bar I get to be on the half
On the
notes.
that is
Yeah.
so that's
And
really
it's
not what people that's not what the average listener hearing it for the first
what I
time would
did. First time
expect.
I heard it, I didn't expect anything like it. And I thought this is brilliant because he's got the polyrhythms. I can't show it all because it's actually a Divisi cello part, but there's a lot of 2 against 3 polyrhythms going on.
And 2
But
against 3 let me just is like when you
yes,
have one part of the rhythm going like 1 and 2 and the other one is going in triplets 1 and so it ends up making this clashy thing that's like and it's a very I think rhythms are very much a felt experience.
Yes. And they have this sense of not instability because it feels really strong, but it's like it generates this energy just by the rubbing between the
Yes.
two.
Mm-hmm.
It generates a lot of electricity. You can feel it. And then the cantabile section, the da 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 da. The cellos get to play that with the violins, and then when they break off, we've got it's kind of like the resolution. Oh, now I'm getting nerdy. The resolution and the suspension are occurring for the same time for about 8 bars, and you feel that surge um, when the two parts split. The violins keep playing the same melody, which you understand is a theme, and the underpinning is kind of breaking through it. It's this rising.
Do you mean the
Yeah.
do 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 do?
No, well, before that. Something very simple, but
Oh,
it's very cool. And it's something that you don't hear the first couple of crawls. Yeah. Happening at the same time as the one that stays in the key. And even, see, I'm really nerding out now. Even the key of B flat has this nobility to it and this sense of justice. I don't know if you call
and a
it
sense
that.
of being friendly to brass.
And a sense of being friendly to us. That's true. But actually not he could have picked a worse key for us. I mean, I'm happy it's not. I mean, B flat's still okay. But yes, it was all about the brass, but not entirely. Not entirely. We got enough of what we needed to. But even that kind of harmonic the little bit of contrary motion between the melody and that rising theme
Yeah. I actually
is really cool.
wasn't super. I mean, I think when a musician listens to a score, if you play an instrument, you're listening for your instrument. So,
which is why I really don't have a good sense of the overall quality of it.
but when you're
Because
playing
just
that,
doing
I'm
my
like,
little
oh, I
job,
don't know if I realized that was specifically the cello thing because I'm thinking of
no,
the
no.
violin thing.
Well,
But
we might have been sharing that with some trombones, actually. We often get paired with trombones and bassoons.
right.
We have our little friends in the orchestra.
But I know what you mean by the contrary motion in that part. So contrary motion is exactly what it sounds like. It's when one part is getting higher and another part is getting lower. So it's like basically,
Right.
yeah.
But if you switch them and the bottom's going up and the top's going down, that's
Yeah.
so they meet in the middle
Yeah.
and then restart. And that's what they're doing. And the dun da 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 is the restart. Because then, which is still contrary. Because my part, dun da dee, da, dun, da, 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 dun, dun.
Yeah.
F.
Oh, and then it goes back. Yeah. Oh, that's so great.
It is so great. I'm just astounded by what he's done.
So
Really, truly.
that's how minute one starts. That's how the beginning starts. What are some other things that you notice when we just watched the 5 minutes? Anything
Well, there's a part where the crawl has to melt. The music melts as well. It's so
Oh.
clever, right?
Do you mean when
That
the
it's
words
been
are
this-
fading away?
Yeah, there's a beautiful parallel fading away, or really almost a dissolving of the main key and the main sound. It's very beautiful, and he puts a taste of da-da, dun, da-da, dun, da-da, dun, 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 in there, but it's so masked because he's using it as a dissolve, and so what you hear is like this. I'm trying to remember what he was doing.
Do you mean that violin part? It's like very
It's
high.
after there's no more brass, and it's before the piccolo solo comes in on top of it.
Oh, right.
First he
So it's
creates
before
a bed.
it's like before the panning.
Yes.
It dissolves and then you cease and then you're in space.
And the music dissolves. And then when it refocuses again, you're already in the first theme of the action.
Yeah. Oh, those
which has its
transitions
own
are
themes.
my favorite. Because of Star Wars, my favorite part of films is how the opening transitions to scene one and how the final scene transitions to the credits. I mean, no one
Right.
does it better than Star Wars, I think.
No, it's like the curtain rises, the curtain closes. And once again, going back to, I'm really glad they had the sense to ask John Williams to please do the last three, so that sonically it's of a piece, because he's the only one who was there from the beginning. He's thinking about stuff from 1977 that he's going to bring forward, and he's thinking of the slight alterations he's going to make to show the change in what's happening to the characters. Because after
Yeah.
all, the three main characters do all die off. So
John Williams is really good at leaving Easter eggs, like leaving bits for the audience to glom onto if they're familiar with the themes. In
this is
fact,
true.
sometimes people like John Williams writes so intentionally often that it would be a spoiler to listen to a clip of even like the music, parts of the music before hearing something else. Because you never
it's
know when like a little,
yeah.
when a little motif will be.
We were trying to figure out, seriously,
Oh, this is
no, this because we had no film, we had no visual. We were trying to figure out the plot from the music. We were trying to figure it out just from hearing what was going on. And the part, towards the end of the film where we thought, oh, this should be happy music, and then why is it sad? We came up with plots and ideas for, because we were being kept in the dark, which is fine. That was fine at the time.
How
But we
fun.
were using the music, and the music actually was very descriptive, like you said. It really did tell you a lot. It told you a lot. But I suppose you could even make a hobby out of taking one character's theme who you like and following it through 9 films. You could almost do that
Mm-hmm.
because he kept those themes so. I mean, they were hidden, but they were never sullied. I mean, you could always, if you were smart, you could find it in there.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, if you were playing
And he
in the
would invert them
orchestra.
too and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
hide them in ways.
Yeah, and you think that not only are those themes iconic to the film and to culture, but they're used as memes for all kinds of other purposes as well.
Oh, yes.
They have such strength and lasting power and immediate recognition. Like, you hear, what was the one I used to hear? Because, of course, I listened to a lot of political radio, and there was one theme where they used the clown car theme, which is not Star Wars, and mixed it with Darth Vader. And that was how they were going to tell you there was going to be news about Trump. It was really well done because you knew way before what was going to happen and who it was.
Wow.
It's a nice combination.
Music and sound are huge clues.
Yes, and this was on the radio because I'm usually listening. If I'm not listening to podcasts, I'm listening to live radio, and it was so evocative. It made me laugh so hard because it just told the whole story in about 15 seconds.
Wow. Yeah. The meme appeal of Star Wars
The meme appeal
definitely
of Star Wars,
extends to the music.
Oh yeah.
So after the dissolving, well, in these minutes, it starts with the opening crawl and it goes all the way until the moment where Poe is doing something very rash.
Yes.
And do you remember, or first, do you record in order of the film?
No.
Okay.
No. It's a complete hodgepodge.
So when you recorded this, you probably don't even remember when you recorded this
No, I'm
specific
sorry to
section
say.
because you didn't
And
go in order. It was just,
No, we never did. We never did. We would do the big cues first.
oh, that makes sense.
So
That makes sense.
very often the ending would happen very early in the series of sessions. You would do the end first.
Did your sheet music have names on it?
No, they were
Okay,
very clever
okay,
about that too.
okay.
We had descriptors of emotions. We had places, there were no names. And they're usually marked, as you know, like 8M2 or 2M7. And all you know
No
is, well, if
Ray's
it's
theme,
8.
the big
Oh, no.
betrayal.
Oh, no. None of that, because they don't want us to know. End credit is what I got here. I'm trying to think of some of the other. Let's see if I've got a few. Let's see if I've got names it's on my phone, right? Terrible. Who cares? Let me see what I've got here. This is like years old. It's terrible.
4 years at this point, but
Yeah,
after
right?
2020, you can double that basically.
Cockpit dialogue.
Oh, oh,
That tells you a
funny.
lot.
So that
The
is what?
Kiss. That was from episode 9. The Kiss. So you
Oh,
see as little
wait,
information as
wait.
possible.
You
Tell
had
me.
something on your music that said "The Kiss." I
Yeah,
feel like
I'm looking at it
that is
right now.
I feel like that is an extreme spoiler.
It would be, right? If you knew anything about what was going
That's
on.
true. That's
And the
true.
fact that, but all we knew at the time, because we didn't know anything else, the kiss, we didn't know the plot. But this is one of those parts I'm looking at right now. It's in D minor. It's really sad.
Yeah.
You think, wait a minute, it's a kiss. Why is it sad? That's what we were all wondering what happened. Somebody died. That's all we could figure. It's
Yeah,
all we could come
D
up with.
minor is that D minor really is like a recurring thing. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but I feel like we hear shortly after these 5 minutes. So I think in the next 5 minutes, there's a part where there's just a big D minor moment of silence.
Yeah, I don't know if it's for the strings. It doesn't seem, but it's D is a very sonorous key for just about everybody. And I think perhaps that's the most resonant key they can come up with. It can be humorous, like all of pirate movies. They're all in D minor or some such
Yeah.
nonsense like that. And you think, well, that's because that's a basic, sea shanty key. But in fact, except for the really important themes. Well, in fact, some of the themes from the sequels, I believe, are also in D minor.
Yeah.
There's you remember probably better than me because I don't remember seeing the movies that many times. I don't know that much, but there's a lot of D minor in films in general, but especially in these sequels, and possibly if I went back to listen to them all, the others, because it's a good action key.
Is it?
It is, because a lot of what will happen when you're a cello, you just get a lot of that.
So C would be a good action key too then? Maybe?
No, not really.
Not
It's
as
too
much.
flabby.
Not because it's
Not
yeah,
as
it's
much.
flabby. Yeah.
I'm thinking
Would D flat be a good one for cello?
not as much.
Okay.
It's okay. It's for opera. But what's so funny is that if I think of there's a single note on which I played more action rhythms than anyone, it would be that low D. And sometimes they'll have it do it in some octaves. Sometimes it's divisi, because if you have enough cellos, you can make anything stronger by one person on a note. But there is something about, I know the cello likes D. I know all the string, we know about that.
The strings
like
love D.
But it turns out that almost any concert instrument also likes D, and everyone else can put up with it.
And that's the main thing. I don't care
Yeah,
about the other
right.
instruments. I care about the
Yeah.
strings. We love
Who cares
D.
about
Everyone
the-
else
the
can put up with
clarinets,
it.
right? But I think, someone who I hope maybe, now I am dropping a name, that you can talk to on another one of these music minutes is Doug. Doug, the tubist. Doug, I'm having
I
Alzheimer's.
feel like I might have no Doug in the future.
You will,
when I
yes.
get Doug on the show.
He is the tubist in Los Angeles. He's it.
Oh, definitely want Doug.
Yes, you want to talk to Doug Tornquist. There we go. Now I've thrown his last name in.
So
now
Doug
he's legend.
Performed on these scores with you.
Yes, he did. And many, many, many more. He used to teach at Cal Arts.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the
when we
school that
had
we're from.
tubists. Yes, that we're from. Yes, Cal Arts. But Doug has done it all, and he is relied upon so heavily by everybody. And he did do some beautiful, beautiful work in Star Wars, and that's a concert instrument, I believe, isn't it? Yes, tuba.
Yeah.
It's the one that's concert, and he was the underpinning of all of that score. He and a couple of friends. I mean, because it takes more than one tuba to do a John Williams score, but
Oh, yeah.
Doug is
Talking-
the number one.
Brass plays a very interesting, important role in Star Wars, and especially I think low brass is
Yes.
very key for a lot of those, especially ominous
Yes.
moments.
Yes. And he depended very heavily on them and their tasteful playing.
Yeah, it's
Really
that would
did.
be that would be an instrument that gets like lots of solos, basically, lots of
Yes.
very important carries a lot of weight.
It does.
The D, I do want to explain the D thing because I think sometimes it's easy to latch on to, oh, D should always be a good key or whatever. Okay, so speaking from a string player perspective, D is a very nice key because it affords for a lot of natural vibrations in our instrument. Would that be a good description
That'd
of
be a
why? I mean,
great
D is an open
description.
string, and sound production is basically all physics. It's all air
Yes.
plus, plus sound. Wait. Air
I,
plus what? There's part of it that I'm missing, but it's basically
the
sound,
vibration
air
of
moving
it.
through space.
Yeah.
And can, Erica, you are the master of harmonics.
I could, shall I show
Can
some
you, yeah,
harmonics?
like maybe
Sure.
play a D versus some other note, and so we can hear the difference in the vibrations
Sure.
between them.
Sure. So I like E flat. That's a nice note. And it's kind of activates my open G string a bit. But not really much else. This is the most dead note on the cello, F sharp or G flat. And here's one of the most resonant, G natural. Even if I just finger it. So the most dead one is next to the most live one.
Wow.
And then a note like D, like you were saying, actually is picking up all kinds of notes, and I'll play the series. So if you take a D string and you touch it lightly, you get a note on that's a cousin of D. It's another D. I just went through 12 partials. But you see, all those notes exist inside of an open D string, and that's probably why that and the G are the two most resonant keys in stringland. And this note is the same as the violin open string, and also an open string on the viola, and also the top open string on the bass. So you put them all together, it's kind of the vortex. Yeah, and there's D's. Right.
Like
That's
you
the
can
most.
hear how I'm playing just the open G and D on the violin, and you can first I'll play a different note and let it vibrate naturally. Okay, it's done. It's too loud it's too soft for the mic to pick up, but it's still going.
I heard it.
Yeah.
And on the cello, it's just a bigger box.
It's even
with the
more,
same
yeah.
idea. And then.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's a very long reverb tail. It's like the most natural reverb tail there is. So, how did we get on the subject of D minor? Wow, that was a very fascinating tangent. Okay, so in this 5 minutes, there's a lot of action happening, and there's a lot of what you would call underscore moments. And because this has been a request, and I will keep track of this from episode to episode, but people, Erica, are very interested in the differences between how the tracks line up or not from the motion picture to the soundtrack album that comes out, if that makes sense. So I tried
right.
I listened to, like I started the movie at the same time and started the main title and Escape, track 1 on the Last Jedi soundtrack at the same time to see how long they matched up. And I found that, first of all, if you are trying to do this at home, just know that there's an 18-second offset. So you can, there will be an offset of 18 seconds. The film will be 18 seconds behind. So but aside from that, things line up pretty well until about 2.5 minutes into the film. And then it's like, it's not that the rest of it doesn't line up, because it does eventually get there, but the film adds more. The film adds more buffer. And it's in little things. Like I was trying to observe like where the film would just take a little bit more, 1 more centimeter, just take a little bit of extra space. And it was moments like, I'll give you a concrete one. That great moment before Kylo Ren's theme comes in, that C sharp. Before then, that's like a really impactful moment about 2.5 minutes into the film. And with the mixing and like the sound design, it sounds like kind of a vacuum of, because the Star Destroyers are exiting hyperspace, which is always a little bit of a, like you're kind of there from nowhere. I don't know if that description made sense, but there's a timpani roll leading into and so the timpani is leading up, and in the film, they linger on that moment for longer than if you listen to track 1 of the Last Jedi soundtrack. And in general, that's how it goes. So far it's lining up, but just the film is adding extra filler. They also added in Poe's theme. They added in something when Poe is speaking. I feel like, and I'm actually curious how this was recorded, because I do remember that you were doing a lot of pickup dates, Erica, like it's kind of toward the end.
Yeah.
So was that for edits and stuff to add this extra?
It was. And I also have to say that not all the time, but many times we will record 2 versions of a cue. We'll record the one that goes with the film, and the timing must be with the film. And then we'll record one where we don't have to worry about lining up with a moment in the film, and we can just play straight through.
Oh, that is
And John would control those by the way he conducted. This is why what he does with free conducting to film is so remarkable. And then he'd pull off his headphones and say, finally, we can just do the soundtrack version, and we would play that. Because that was a lot less work. You just played through the music. But the tiny bits he would do live, he would do it as we were working. He would have to put in a little extra time for something that had to be nailed in the film. And we would wait that long. We'd write it in. Just wait for a cue. Wait for another second. Or come in. No, it was rarely coming in early. It was usually waiting. So there you go.
I'm so glad you shared that. That's a gem. That's a gem that a lot of listeners are going to be really excited to hear about. There's a lot of speculation of why things line up and how, I don't know, just I guess people just make stuff up these days. Maybe
sure.
But like want to
might hear
speculate
something
what,
different,
or might be judging it based on maybe what is true for another session or composer. Yes. But to hear that sometimes there actually is a different version. Yes. I think a lot of people will be like, I knew there was something to that, and
it's much easier to do it live on the sound stage than it would be for somebody to spend endless hours trying to match it up and make it sound natural. Even a really great engineer, and they are great engineers at Sony, but I think John always preferred to do it live when he could. He was really sensitive to it sounding natural. And that's why, the freehand conducting, which is just brilliant. And I mean, a few things I guess had to be done with click, but for the most part, he really eschewed it. He did not want to go to that place. And so often, there would be 2 different versions. And that's why the soundtrack isn't always going to line up, because sometimes those pauses that are needed for the action don't sound good as a soundtrack.
Yeah. And it's important to have those pauses. It's not a bad thing. it's necessary for the film to not just barrel on with the music.
Right. And it has to be flexible because little tiny things will change before it's done.
Yeah.
And they want to have all the options ready for post-production.
And I'll mention one other thing if people are paying attention to the lineup. In the motion picture at 4:36 is when we hear the Rebel theme. In the soundtrack, that is at 2:45. So basically by that, yeah, we're already like a minute and a half delayed by then. And yeah, so that's the scorecard on how that lines up for now.
That's brilliant.
So hope that was illuminating. Anyway, Erica, I had one other question for you. What A do you tune to in those sessions?
Great question. That is a great question. You know, ideally 440, but it never works out that way.
Is it always
I'm gonna say
sharper?
Yeah. I'm going to say 441. It can't go above that. But when I'm playing in the group is that it's 441.
Yeah,
Yeah, because 440 just feels a little dull.
it does. It does. It does it increasingly, though that is a subject for much discussion.
Yes.
I'll explain this in a second, but I want to ask, do you know what the London Symphony tunes
That's
to?
a good question. I would have to listen. Well, okay.
Because I was wondering if like the pitch that orchestras are used to playing, because I feel that each orchestra kind of settles into like a pitch, an A that they, I feel like you could tune to it one, but if you're used to playing another, you're gonna naturally, your ears will make you adjust to the new one. I think tuning is like tuning itself is not what is going to chanch.
I think they're trying to force us into a global A, but you know what? That's the first thing I noticed when I heard episode 4, Crawl, is it was sharper. And I thought, oh, is that something with the speed of the recording? No, probably not. Probably they were sharper because the A in England and as you move into continental Europe is much higher than here.
Still?
At least would have been in well, maybe not as much anymore. I don't know, but I know I had one, this has nothing to do with Star Wars, but I had one interesting episode with the Ear Unit, which was my contemporary music ensemble. We played a concert in Brussels way back, before my daughter was born. And we were playing it with an actual tape electronic score. And we had to abandon that piece at the last minute because when we started our dress rehearsal, not only the piano, but the marimba was tuned to 445. And the American recording was at 440. And because there were so many, it was all about hitting simultaneities, hitting unisons with the electronic score. We had to give up and find something else to play.
Wow. Okay.
It was a big difference.
So 440 is how would we describe this? Is a pitch, is a standard pitch that people in orchestras tune to, so that everyone in the orchestra is basically sounding in tune. And
it's all relative.
Yeah. Erica, save me. How do I describe this?
No, but actually, Erica, but actually,
it refers to how many vibration. It refers to how many vibration. Yeah.
Play one for you. It says equal temperament. That's A440. But most orchestras like that. Let me get a better tuner up on my phone. It'll actually tell me what's going on.
I am now grabbing my tuner as well.
So now I'll tune myself sharp. It is not MIDI. Don't tell me it's MIDI. it's a bit sharp of that. Yeah. For
Actually,
people
okay,
like to play.
I have a metronome that gives an A, and it actually
Oh,
goes
play
from
it.
440 to 445.
Oh, good. So I can hear it.
Yeah, so when I'm tuning, or if you want to play an A, I'm trying not to be too loud because this thing is very loud. Um, you can play an A, and I tune my A string to that. But for people who use a different A, which vibrates at 441 hertz, I'm explaining this really terribly. I
You're doing
understand.
great.
It sounds like this. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to slide it from 440 to 445, and you'll hear what a difference is if an orchestra is tuning at 440 versus if their ear is calibrated to 445. So this would be if you're playing the same A. Do you hear how big of a difference that is from 440 to 445? So basically that would be like if, people were looking at the same color, but one person sees it a lot darker than another person. And you're both trying to describe the same color. So that can account for a lot of pitch differences too. Yeah, 440 is the standard for orchestras, but a lot of musicians like to play a little bit sharper. In fact, I was taught growing up to tune at 441 or 2,
Yeah.
which
Yeah. Those
and
were socially acceptable.
yeah, And if I were playing a solo with an orchestra, my teacher would tell me to always go a tiny bit higher as well to
Yeah.
quote unquote sound more brilliant on top of the bed of 440s. So, so that is interesting. Okay, I didn't really realize, but that is a difference between London and LA, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was more regulated. I mean, as you hear the prequels, which are later, they sound closer to what, Universal A has agreed to be. But that very first one, 1977, that was pre-internet, that was pre-everything. The orchestra decide that's where the A was, that's where the A was. And so, yes, it was higher.
And that's what listeners would expect too, perhaps. Yeah.
We get used to that, even though you may think you don't hear those increments, but you're feeling them on a cellular level.
Yeah, I agree. Wow. Is there anything else that I feel like we've talked about so many things, and there are so many, we could go on forever basically, but we will not go on forever. However, if there is anything else at all that you have to share about.
Oh, just my infinite admiration for John Williams and how lucky I feel that I got to play with him on his music. It was not the first time, fortunately, because he did other projects in LA, but it probably will be the last, and I'm pretty sad about that. It was a wonderful thing, and I'm really glad I got to experience it. So he's a great writer, great composer.
That's really great to hear. Oh, well, thank you so much, Erica. I'm honored that you were my first guest.
Oh, thank you. I would do it. I would always love to come back if I had something
Oh,
decent to say.
You open invitation to
Oh,
come back,
thank
and
you.
also next season I will do episode 9, which you remember more. So
Yes, for some reason I do. I kept better track of it. That would be lovely.
it makes sense. It was his last one. I would remember that too. All right. So that is all we have for today. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe wherever you're listening to it. I plan to post these on YouTube, and also you're probably listening to this on a podcast platform. So, wherever that is, just subscribe so you get the next episode, which will be next week, talking about minutes 6 through 10 of The Last Jedi. And Erica, if people have any questions for you, do you have a contact you're willing to give out, or a social media, or would you like them to go through me?
I'd love if it went through you, only because
Cool.
I might mix it up with all the other stuff I'm doing teaching. So, but yes, thank you. I'd be happy
All
to
good.
answer any questions.
So if you have any questions for either Erica or myself, or any future guest requests, or I don't know, just any questions at all or comments, you can just find me and give them to me, and I will direct them to the appropriate channels. Until next week, I'm Chrysanthi. This is my guest, Erica. And you've been listening to Star Wars Music Minute. I need to get better at that spiel. Star Wars Music Minute.